So we will start with talking about the HT5 scatter plots. The HT5 is a CBC analyzer, and the scatter plot graph basically shows the distribution of your white cells and the different classes of your white cells. It measures it with low angle scatter, middle angle scatter, and wide angle scatter, and then basically makes an XYZ graphing coordinates comparing those values. So with regards to what these are showing, every single one of these colors are a different white cell category. So your turquoise is your neutrophils, your dark blue down in this corner down here are your basophils, your greens are your lymphocytes, your magentas are monocytes, and your bright reds over here are eosinophils. And the idea with these, especially for your LAS, MAS scatter plot, is that...
What does LAS and MAS stand for?
Low angle scatter and middle angle scatter.
And do we know what the scatters are, like what they're representing? I know from flow cytometry, one of them does granularity and one of them does size.
Yeah, so your low angle scatter does the cell volume.
Okay.
Your wide angle scatter, so your WAS, does the granularity.
Okay.
And your middle angle scatter does the complexity.
Okay.
Okay. So the LAS and the MAS ones, so low angle scatter, middle angle scatter, are the ones that is the screen that generally pops up. If you touch on this screen, it'll pull up the other two values on the analyzer itself. But what we're looking for is for all of these colors to be as together as possible. The further out this turquoise representation goes, it means there's more size variation within that cell population. So if you had a patient that had a high white cell count and specifically a high neutrophil count, and you looked at the scatter plot and you saw this turquoise dot was just everywhere, I would be highly suspicious of bands. In which case, your analyzer will also pop up a message that says high white cell count, slide review advised, and you can check a slide and see bands. So that's how I would interpret that. The analyzer will do the best it can to tell you when blood is abnormal. It's not going to be able to diagnose anything. But if you're seeing anything odd, like this arc, this half arc in our sample on this handout, is what a fairly normal dog sample is going to look like. Every species is going to be slightly different with their normals. But if this is looking weird in any way, your analyzer is trying to tell you there is something wrong with the cells. And it's going to try to categorize them as best it can, but if you've got huge cells, it may categorize them as monocytes, in which case you're going to have a huge population of monocytes. And your slide's going to look different than what your readout's going to print. Okay.
Nucleated reds?
Nucleated reds are actually going to show up more on your printout here with your RBC histogram. So with your histogram for the RBC, you're looking for a single narrow peak. The narrower this peak is, the less cell size variation there is. So as this peak broadens out and becomes more along the lines of this, you have more size variation. If you have something that looks like this, you have two separate sizes, and part of that is very well going to be a separate population of nucleated reds. I wouldn't be surprised if this type with the wider band had some nucleated reds, because you do have that, just not as many as with a double peak.
So nucleated reds don't get...
They're not going to get lumped in the white cells.
They're not going to get lumped in the white cells.
They shouldn't get. You may have the occasional one patient that does because of just how mass is with the cells, but by and large, it is able to pick them out and keep them in the red cell population.
Great.
Your platelet histogram is my favorite one in the world because this is great for cats with the notorious platelet clumping problem. And if you get a low platelet, so let's say that this number was 50, and it was a cat sample, if you had a lovely curve that looked like this, or that was a little bit narrower but still was an obvious curve, I would say that that was a true low platelet count. If it does something that goes more straight and kind of straight this direction and then straight up, that's more indicative of a platelet clumping situation. And so it's a quick reference. I know you guys are checking slides anyway, but that's kind of going to be your quick. I don't need to really worry about the platelets on that cat because it's likely clumping.
Okay.
So yeah, your white cell, this is your white blood cell histogram. With our Hematrude, we only had the histograms option. This kind of becomes background noise considering you have the scatter plot now. But it is nice to look at in case you get a really weird readout up here that's just not conducive to life. check this white blood cell scatter histogram, because if this is doing something weird like going up and then flatlining, and then a couple things down here, that flat line shouldn't be there. That means there is something really weird with the counts. Rerun your sample. If your sample is still giving you that and you've run a quality control, redraw your sample. And just make sure that you have no clots in that sample. Check it with a wooden applicator stick, things along those lines. So that's kind of going to be your troubleshooting guide with this.
Great.
Okay.
The other thing you mentioned with CBC machine is the correctly identifying cat and dog.
Yes, species specificity is extremely important in the HT5. It measures cell types differently. So if you accidentally run a dog sample as a cat in your analyzer, you'll be flagged with macrocytosis on your red cells, and that'll be a huge indicator. If you happen to do that, you are going to have to rerun your sample underneath the correct species, because all of your values are going to be off, and it's not a 1-to-1 ratio with regards to like the chemistry analyzer, where you can take the reference ranges because it's a true value. It's categorizing cells differently. So if you are in doubt and you find that's the case, rerun it. Don't even try to correlate it across.
Great.
Okay.
Are there any other pitfalls or tricks?
Really check. I would highly recommend that we're reinforcing the idea to check all of our purple top tubes for clots or microclots with the sticks before every sample, because even if you have microclots, A, you're never going to get them all out, and B, you have no idea how many of your cell population is involved in those clots, and so you can try getting your giant clot out, but now you've just completely offset everything. So check those samples before you run it. And best practice is going to be, have your techs make your doctors annoyed and say, I need more blood. But I'd rather have you guys get more blood than get frustrated with results that aren't making sense. So that's pretty much troubleshooting with the HT5. If you find anything else that you're having questions with, like the results are just not making sense no matter what you're doing, and you're not seeing an issue on the blood smear, call tech support. Their number's on the front left corner of the analyzers. It's 1-800-GO-HESKA, option 3. If it's after hours, always choose the page option. Don't ever leave a message, and they will get back to you immediately.
Okay.
Okay.
Great.
With the dry chem, hemolyzed samples do affect your values. But there is a handout. Thank you so much. There is a handout that I will forward to you guys that actually lists out every single one of the values and how they're affected. So you can go into it saying, like, for example, I just ran blood work on my cat, who I know is in kidney failure, but his sample was slightly hemolyzed and his GGT was off the charts. I'm like, okay, I know it's hemolyzed. I know he's not in liver failure. I know it's just the kidney values I need to worry about. So we have that handout for you guys. Icteric samples, amylolysis is going to be affected, but that's the only one. And lipemic samples, lipemia is not going to affect any of our results.
Okay.
The only time it's going to come into play is if you have the lab that just ate and has the solid fat layer on top of your sample. You just scrape that out, respin it, and then it should be good to go. If you're having problems with lipemic samples, call tech support. They will walk you through a spin it down for forever procedure, basically, to try to get that fat out of the sample as much as possible. But that's few and far between. Okay?
Great.
If you're having problems with your electrolyte values and you don't believe those, double check how the electrolyte reference fluid is being handled. The analyzer compares concentration of our reference fluid to the concentration of the plasma or serum that's being run. And so as that reference fluid, if that reference fluid is left uncapped, so you've got a DC 7000, so it won't be left uncapped, but if you leave that in there for too long, it's evaporating every single time that cap is taken off. And so that's going to change your concentration, and you're going to get artificially low values in your blood. So make sure that that is getting changed every 10 hours for your 7000. Basically, it should be at least every twice a shift. I would recommend it.
Okay.
That's going to be that'll be the first troubleshooting that tech support even tells you to do, is make sure that that is being handled correctly. Check for fibrin clots. Also go swirl your applicator stick in your plasma sample. Don't stick it down in your cell layer, but check it just for fibrin. You'll get clogging errors, or it may not spot certain slides. That'll be because of that.
Okay.
That's pretty much all the major troubleshooting. That's for sample. I mean, you guys are running controls regularly on your analyzers, and that's going to be your first foremost. Do I trust my results? Are my controls running in range? Then I kind of need to trust my results. With the EPOC, that one's a little bit more challenging with regards to the results because it's going to depend on, is your patient on anesthesia? Are you ventilating your patient? Things along those lines. Your values can be fairly wonky depending on what's going on with your patient. And that's going to be something you guys need to take into consideration. Tech support will be able to kind of help you understand if you know that your PO2 and your PCO2 are going to be both slightly elevated on an anesthetized patient. At least you have that heads up for when you have everything flagged for your blood gases for that case. Each one of those cards has its own internal calibration, basically. So it calibrates every single time. There is a control, but it's rarely used because of the internal calibration. So I would be hard pressed to say that I don't trust the results that analyzer always gives. It's just you got to take it into context of what's going on with the patient. Perfect. Pretty much what I got for that.
Okay.
All right.
Cool.